I'm honored to be standing here before you today. I'm honored because St. Ignatius High School, the Jesuits, Ignatian spirituality, and JFAN mean so much to me and have given me so much. So I'd like to thank John Fitzgerald. Where are you, Fitz? I don't know where you're sitting, wherever Fitz is. I'd like to thank John Fitzgerald and the Loyola Club for inviting me to give this talk, and Sharon Burns for helping me prepare it. I wouldn't have got there without you. I am blessed and humbled by those gifts. Although I have to say, Fitz sure didn't make it easy on me. Not only is this our first Loyola Club in a year and a half, no pressure, but it is our first time live streaming the event. So I'd like to acknowledge and welcome Jesuit friends and alum from across the country, as well as friends and colleagues from my 30 years in the business world. If you fall into that last category and are not familiar with the Jesuits, here are 3 things you might find interesting. First, the Jesuits were founded by St. Ignatius of Loyola, who I will talk a lot about today. Second, they're very big on education, as evidenced by their large network of high schools and colleges, like Georgetown and Gonzaga and Cleveland's own John Carroll University, just to name a few. And third, Francis is the first Jesuit to become Pope. To quote Martha Stewart, that's a good thing. Okay, finding purpose, from cannonballs to second mountains. What's that all about? Simply put, it's about personal transformation. More specifically, it's about how we can turn crisis into the opportunity to find purpose. The cannonball speaks to the crisis part of the equation and is reference to the moment 500 years ago this year when Ignatius was gravely wounded in battle. The second mountain is a reference to David Brooks' best-selling book of the same name. It speaks to the opportunity that crisis affords us to shed our ego and to find our higher purpose, but only if we embrace the long and often difficult struggle that comes with it. We can certainly see this trajectory in the life of St. Ignatius of Loyola. His first self was that of a nobleman and a soldier whose primary desire was to woo women and to win fame. But at the Battle of Pamplona, a cannonball shattered Ignatius's leg, along with his ego and his sense of self. While convalescing, Ignatius was inspired by books he read on the lives of Christ and the saints, triggering his eventual spiritual conversion. But the journey ahead was about to get much more difficult, including a dark and trying year in a cave near Manresa, praying several hours a day while begging for his keep. After his enlightenment there, Loyola began an arduous but transformational climb to his second mountain. Founder of the Jesuit order, with a simple but ambitious goal to help souls. When I read The Second Mountain and I reflected on the life of Ignatius, I realized that my journey has also followed a similar trajectory, also happening in stages and also involving a lot of struggles. To be clear, my cannonball moment and my personal transformation were not nearly as dramatic or as inspirational as a soldier turned saint. But over time, I was able to evolve from somebody who was successful but self-absorbed into a servant leader, using the tenets and tools of Ignatian spirituality to help guide me along the way. And so today, I will share a bit of my story in the hope that you find it helpful in some way. As you listen, I encourage you to consider your own path and where you are currently on your life's journey. Because wherever that may be, it is never too late to find purpose. I'll start by spending a minute on my first mountain. I was born to wonderful parents and raised with 4 older siblings on the west side of Cleveland and in the parish of St. Christopher. Lord of the Flies, indeed. I received a great education, and after earning an MBA, I started my career at Frito-Lay in Dallas, Texas in the early 1990s. I was promoted 3 times in 4 years. I was running a $1 billion business by age 31. And it was there that I even created Hint of Lime Tostitos. You're welcome. It's a running joke with my daughters. No matter what else I've done in my life, they are so proud, and all their friends are like, that's the guy who invented Hint of Lime Tostitos. More importantly, I somehow convinced a wonderful woman I didn't deserve to marry me. Amy and I bought our first home and had our first 2 children in the mid-90s. I was successful, and I was happy. I was at the peak of my first mountain. I was also full of myself. I lost my perspective, and then I lost my way. I began to chase riches and honors. Specifically, the riches and honors of the dot-com boom of the late 1990s. My friends at Frito were leaving to join cool new companies like Amazon and eBay and Google. Eventually, I became tempted by the lure of becoming a dot-com millionaire too. Before I knew it, I convinced Amy, who is now pregnant with our 3rd child, to move sight unseen, mind you, to Houston, Texas, so I could join a dot-com startup with venture capital backing and an IPO on the horizon. Yay. Fast forward 6 months later, I got tempted by an even more exciting offer in Silicon Valley and almost moved us there. Fast forward another 6 months, and I did accept an opportunity to join a startup in the DC area. I was putting my career and money before my faith and my family. And I was about to be struck with the first cannonball of my adult life. I was going to drive to DC ahead of the family to start my new job. The day before, I went for a jog. When I got home, I became dizzy and I couldn't breathe. I broke into a cold sweat and collapsed on the bathroom floor. I didn't know what was wrong because I never had one before, but I later realized I was having a full-blown grade A panic attack, which if you've never had one, I don't recommend them. Put another way, I had been struck by God's baseball bat, as Father James Martin calls it. I'd stopped listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit, so he used more drastic measures to get my attention. Still, I shook it off. I packed my things and I got in the car the next morning. I drove to Dallas, where I planned to sleep that night at a friend's house before continuing across the country. But I didn't sleep. I stayed awake all night with my heart pounding and my mind racing, trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. I was completely lost. I called Amy the next morning and told her what happened. She gently told me to come back to Houston, which I did. I told the company in DC that I had changed my mind and I wasn't coming. I felt an enormous sense of relief, like I had dodged a bullet, and I set about to getting back to normal. Except normal didn't come back. I was supposed to be the sole breadwinner for a wife and 3 small children, but I didn't have a salary or much in savings. Soon the dot-com bubble burst, the job market dried up, and my prospects felt grim. To make matters worse, I was in a mess purely of my own making. I didn't have cancer. I hadn't lost a loved one. I hadn't even lost my job. I had given it up. So I started to obsess about the mistakes I had made and about putting our young family in jeopardy. I worried incessantly about our now uncertain future. That anxiety led to sleeplessness, which was awful. That sleeplessness led to depression, which was even worse. I was in a downward spiral, and I soon hit my low point, feeling confused, afraid, and even desperate. In Ignatian terms, I was in a state of desolation. And it was certainly no picnic for Amy. She was already far from home, caring for a 4-year-old daughter, a 2-year-old son, and a newborn. Now she had my lost soul on her hands. But she didn't blink. She never wavered. Her commitment to me and to our family was already at 100%. But somehow, she found a way to increase it. Instead of the situation straining our marriage, her support strengthened it. Where we are today started with Amy in that moment. And for that, I'm forever grateful. This is the point in the program where I avoid eye contact with Amy and do a little quick water break. Okay, let's shift into a happier gear here. Because fortunately, we were about to get some help from the big man upstairs. After hitting me with his baseball bat, and rightfully so, the good Lord soon opened his arms and gently called me home. And that is when I began to find my way again. One note, Amy and I were practicing Catholics, having been married in the church, baptizing our children, and attending Sunday Mass. That said, my relationship with God was not as close as it should be, with a prayer life that was dry at best, non-existent at worst. And my faith was certainly not the highest priority in my life at that time. But at some point during my season of suffering, as Brooks calls it, we attended Sunday Mass, and the gospel happened to be a little parable about a prodigal son. That got my attention. The next week, it was about a lost sheep. Again, I took notice. And the next week, it was about a fig tree that was given another year to bear fruit. And a little side note, right now I'm doing the spiritual exercises. My exercise for this morning was to read Luke chapter 15, the same Gospels. Coincidence? I don't think so. But the messages were powerful and direct, and they woke me up. I needed to regain perspective, reset my priorities, and become who God intended me to be. Specifically, I came to the realization that the first 30 years of my life had been all about me. And those who know me would agree. I needed to put those days behind me. I would now prioritize my faith and my family above all else, with friendship close behind. And that's what I did. Equipped with renewed perspective and my priorities of faith, family, and fellowship, as I called it, I began to climb my second mountain. But first things first, we moved from Texas to New Jersey to be closer to Amy's family in New York and to more of our friends. There we had our fourth child and built a life around our parish community for the next 20 years. And it was there that I began to rediscover Ignatian spirituality. It was now the early 2000s. We were very active in our parish, and my spiritual life was richer. But something was still missing. I needed more, or magis, the fundamental Ignatian idea of aspiring to do better. So the first thing I did was to begin spiritual exercises with Rita Wilkie, a sister of St. Joseph who awoke in me the Ignatian spirituality that I'd been taught in high school, but which had been largely dormant since. In particular, she emphasized the importance of dedicating 5 minutes each day to the examen of conscience, a simple but structured form of prayer to help us notice when we're moving deeper into our relationship with God or drawing away from it, so we can strive for more of the former and less of the latter. Second, I began doing the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius under the guidance of another SSJ, Sister Marcy Springer. The exercises is a more rigorous program that helped me build a much deeper and richer understanding of Ignatian spirituality, which in turn has become an integral part of my being. Kind of like, the muscle memory that comes from learning and playing the games of golf or tennis. Third, I read several books on Ignatian spirituality, 2 of which most shaped my spirituality in the real world. The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything by Father James Martin, and Heroic Leadership by Chris Lowney. Those 2 books helped me understand the need to be a contemplative in action. I said contemplative yesterday, and our dry run Fitz is like, it's contemplative. Easy for me to say. A contemplative in action, and that's someone who doesn't confine his or her spirituality to the retreat house, but who applies it everywhere he or she goes and in everything he or she does. There was one problem, though. I was not very good at it. I was, and I still am, an eager student of Ignatian spirituality. But at that point, I was not much of a practitioner. To put it in the words of a prominent psychologist, I had deepened inward, but I had not yet expanded outward, which was rather unfortunate because I was an executive who was leading teams of people. I was smart, driven, hardworking, and a pretty good guy. But as a leader, I was tough and critical and impatient and not particularly humble or empathetic or caring. Fortunately, that was about to change and my purpose would be revealed to me, not by a Jesuit or a nun or an Ignatian scholar, but by my funny Jewish friend. I was now 10 years into the climb of my second mountain. I was working as a VP of marketing at Campbell Soup with a very young and inexperienced team. Our results were poor, and I was driving the team hard, to the point where they were burned out and demoralized. What I was doing certainly wasn't working, so I asked my most trusted team member, "What can I do better?" Doug Brand looked at me and said, "Just be Yoda." Come again? He said, "Yeah, Yoda from Star Wars. You have all this experience and wisdom like Yoda. We're the young Jedi. We want to do well, but we don't know how. You need to spend time with us and teach us and guide us so we can grow and do better." The light bulb went on. Servant leadership, plain and simple. It wasn't about what they could do for me to get better business results. It was about what I could do for them to help them learn and grow and be happy and successful. It brought me full circle to my time at Ignatius and the words of the late, great Jim Skirl. A Jesuit education doesn't exist to make you better than everyone else. It exists to make you better for everyone else. And it was then that I realized my purpose. If I wanted to love and serve God, I needed to fully commit to loving and serving others. My purpose was to become the man for others that God intended me to be. Not just at home, not just at work, not just when I felt like it or when it was convenient for me. I needed to be a servant leader in all facets and in all circumstances of my life. Ever since, I have strived to do as asked in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 2. Shepherd the flock entrusted to your care. Watch over them, not for what you will get out of it, but because you are eager to serve. I was now on my second mountain with a completely different worldview. Once I found my purpose of servant leadership, there was no turning back. And once I started to really live that purpose, it changed everything for me and for those around me. My one-on-ones with team members soon became Yoda time, where instead of covering my to-do list of tasks for them to complete, we had an open agenda that started with two simple questions. How are you? Or how are you doing? And how can I help you? Team members grew and flourished. Our performance improved dramatically. We became very close as a unit, and I was happier and more fulfilled as a leader than I had ever been. And while things did get better, there was still plenty of stumbles and backsliding in my future. As it did with Ignatius, my personal transformation happened in stages and involve struggle. But the great thing about finding your purpose is that once you know it and commit to living it, purpose provides clarity of direction and ultimately unleashes your full potential. Case in point, my decision to join Kind Snacks as CEO in 2018, which was about 7 years after my Yoda moment at Campbell's. You might know Kind as the fruit and nut bars in the clear wrapper. You may have seen Kind's founder, Daniel Lebetsky, on Shark Tank. What you might not know is that Kind was founded with a purpose to help create a healthier and kinder world, one act and one snack at a time. When presented with the opportunity, I knew I wanted to help Kind live its purpose and fulfill its potential. But there was a catch, and it was a big one. My current company was being acquired. As an officer of that company, I stood to earn a substantial payout in the year ahead, one that would secure our family's future, which, based on my time in Houston, felt like a direct gift from God. I was faced with the biggest personal and professional decision of my life: stay for the payout and pass on Kind, or join Kind and pass on the payout. That's when I drew upon another tool of Ignatian spirituality: discernment. For those not familiar, discernment is the general term for the decision-making process outlined in Ignatius's spiritual exercises. It assumes that the choice is between two goods. Otherwise, there's no choice to be made. Unlike traditional decision-making, instead of saying, "This is what I want for me," we ask God, "What do you want for me?" And then we try to discern which way the Spirit moves us. When it came time to make my decision, I pulled out Father Martin's Jesuit guide so I could brush up on the rules of discernment. I went to the table of contents to look up that chapter, but 3 other chapters caught my eye. I decided to reread those first: Be Who You Is, The Simple Life, and Surrender to the Future. Those chapters reminded me that how one discerns is as important as what we discern. Specifically, we need to be in a state of spiritual poverty or complete and utter dependence on God, and indifference, the interior freedom that comes from being unbiased and completely open to God's call. With that approach, it became clear to me that I couldn't let money play a role in the decision. I needed to free myself from its influence. Once I was able to do that, the Spirit moved me, and the clarity I received was unmistakable. I was being called to lead and serve Kind. So I left the payout behind me, and I moved forward, and it proved to be one of the best decisions of my entire life. Not to say that my time at Kind was easy. Just because you discern and you feel you're on the right path doesn't mean it's supposed to be easy. You'll still have crosses to bear. During my tenure, we had more than our fair share of cannonballs at Kind. Our growth in the U.S. had slowed. Our international expansion had stalled. Our profits were down. We had to overhaul our sales and marketing model, which led to the first downsize in Kind's 15-year history and the most painful leadership experience of my career. To top it off, the global pandemic sent snack bar sales tumbling and scattered our New York-based team members to the wind. I must admit, I felt like giving up more than once. But each time I revisited my purpose and asked myself whether I was still called to serve the Kind team. Each time, the answer was a clear yes. Each time, I carried on. And with the commitment and hard work of an incredible team, we were able to accomplish amazing things despite all those setbacks. We reinvigorated growth and profit in the U.S. We launched Kind into new categories like snack mixes and cereal and frozen treats. With our partners at Mars, we expanded Kind into 36 countries as far-flung as China and Russia and Australia. We doubled down on our social impact with programs such as Snack and Give Back and 21 Days Kind. We significantly stepped up our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And we even strengthened our culture despite working remotely. Ultimately, we successfully transitioned Kind to the Mars family of companies, where it can now live its purpose and realize its potential in the hands of their values-driven leaders and associates. Not a bad outcome, given all those cannonballs. After turning over the reins to Mars this past spring, I planned to take some downtime and recharge. It was gonna be the summer of Mike. All I can say is, man plans and God laughs. You guessed it, more cannonballs. In the past 6 months, I left the workforce for the first time in 3 decades. We sold the home where we had raised our kids for 20 years. We became empty nesters. And sadly, we lost Amy's beloved father, Hap Boning. All while still contending with COVID, of course. So did the anxiety, sleeplessness, depression, and desolation I experienced in Houston return? Quite the contrary. Instead, I feel an incredible sense of peace and clarity because I know my purpose. And I know that I am now being called to live that purpose in ways that I might not have been able to as a CEO. For example, I've been able to give Amy and the kids my full time and attention as we navigate this transition. Probably more than they want, but they're handling it well. I joined the board of the Center for Higher Ambition Leadership, a not-for-profit community of business leaders dedicated to building organizations that create both economic and social value. I'm helping to scale my daughter's Girls in STEM project that will enable young women in a Malawi refugee camp to stay in school and become economically independent. And I was able to accept the invitation to speak here at the Loyola Club today. So where do I go from here now that I am a semi-retired empty nester? I don't know. And that's okay. It's okay to not know because it's okay to trust in God and to surrender to the future. It's okay because whatever cannonballs may come any of our way, we can remain focused on faith, family, fellowship, and other important priorities. And it's okay because we can all try our best to live our purpose. And that's the whole point, isn't it? The purpose of life is the life of purpose. To quote Father Joseph Tetlow from his essay, The Way Things Are, God planted deep within each of us an original purpose. Our life is to discover in ourselves that original purpose and to live it out. For the glory of God is a human person fully alive. Wherever you may be on your life's journey, I wish you all the best in finding and living your purpose. Thank you for your time and attention today. God bless and Godspeed.